The foreclosure notice lay crumpled on my parents' kitchen table, its red letters stark against the white paper. Mom paced the worn linoleum floor while Dad sat with his head in his hands, the weight of their financial troubles evident in the slope of his shoulders. $20,000, Mom repeated, her voice cracking. Where are we supposed to find that kind of money in 2 weeks? I took a deep breath, smoothing out the notice. I can help. They both turned to look at me, surprise and something else. Was it shame? Crossing their faces. At 32, I'd built a successful software consulting business, though they'd never shown much interest in understanding exactly what I did. Emma, Dad started. We can't ask you to. You're not asking. I interrupted. I'm offering. The kitchen was silent except for the steady drip of the leaking faucet, a repair that, like so many others, had been postponed due to lack of funds. The house I'd grown up in was showing its age. Peeling wallpaper, creaking floors, a roof that desperately needed replacing. What about your brother? Mom asked. Andrew should help too. He's the successful one. The familiar sting of comparison hit me. Andrew, the golden child who worked on Wall Street and drove expensive cars, but somehow never had money to help the family. Andrew, who could do no wrong even when he did nothing at all. Andrew's not here, I said quietly. I am. I pulled out my phone, opened my banking app, and showed them the transfer I'd already prepared. $20,000, ready to move with a single tap. Mom's eyes widened. How do you have that kind of money? I told you my business was doing well. Though they'd never asked for details, never shown interest in my growing success, I can transfer it right now. Dad straightened in his chair. We'll pay you back, of course. No need, I said, tapping the transfer button. Consider it a gift. The notification chimed, confirming the transaction. $20,000, more than they'd ever believed I could earn, let alone save. Moving from my account to theirs. I don't know what to say, Mom whispered, tears in her eyes. Just promise me something, I said, standing up. Promise you'll stop comparing me to Andrew. Stop acting like I'm somehow less successful just because I chose a different path. The moment the words left my mouth, I knew I'd made a mistake. Mom's face hardened, the gratitude vanishing as quickly as it had appeared. How dare you? She snapped. After everything we've done for you, you use this to try to make us feel guilty. That's not what your brother would never throw his success in our faces like this. I stared at her, disbelief mixing with a lifetime of hurt. I just gave you $20,000 to save your house. And now, you're using it against us. Mom's voice rose, just like you've always been jealous of your brother's success. Margaret, Dad said weakly, but she was too far gone. Get out, she screamed, pointing at the door. Get out and never come back. We don't need your money or your judgment. I stood frozen, the reality of what was happening slowly sinking in. I'd just given them enough money to save their home, and instead of gratitude, I was getting thrown out. Mom, please. Out. She grabbed my arm, pushing me toward the door. And take your money with you. We'll find another way. The transfer's already done, I said quietly, letting her push me onto the front porch. The mortgage is due in 2 weeks. Don't let your pride cost you your home. The door slammed behind me with enough force to rattle the windows. I stood there for a moment, listening to Mom's muffled sobs and Dad's attempts to calm her down. My phone buzzed. A text from Andrew. Heard Mom and Dad are having money troubles. You should help them out since you live closer. I laughed bitterly, walking to my car. Of course he'd heard. He always heard about problems, but never actually helped solve them. Another text came through as I started the engine. BTW, can you spot me 5? Investment opportunity came up. I turned off my phone without responding and pulled away from the house I'd grown up in, the house I'd just saved, the house I'd apparently never be welcome in again. But what my parents didn't know, what no one in the family knew, was that their mortgage wasn't the only financial situation I was intimately familiar with. I'd been watching, learning, gathering information about the house, about Dad's failed business ventures, about Andrew's investment opportunities that always seemed to need family funding. And I'd been planning. Because sometimes being the forgotten child, the one no one pays attention to, means you see everything. And sometimes, being underestimated is the greatest advantage of all. I drove home to my quiet apartment, opened my laptop, and began typing an email to my lawyer. Phase 1 was complete, though not quite as I'd planned. Now it was time for Phase 2, and this time, I wouldn't be the one begging to come back. 2 weeks passed. My phone remained silent. No calls from Mom, no texts from Dad, not even an acknowledgement that my money had saved their home. The only family member who kept in touch was Andrew, sending increasingly desperate requests for loans. I sat in my home office, surrounded by monitors displaying financial data, when Diana from my bank called. Ms. Walker, there's been another attempt to access your accounts. Your brother again. I smiled grimly. Let me guess. He tried to use Mom's maiden name as verification. And your childhood pet's name. Should I flag his attempts as fraudulent? Not yet. I leaned back in my chair. Let's see how far he's willing to go. After hanging up, I pulled up the document I'd been working on. A detailed spreadsheet tracking every loan Andrew had taken from family members over the past 5 years. The total was staggering. Over $300,000 borrowed and never repaid. My intercom buzzed. Your 2 p.m. is here, my assistant announced. Right on time, James Parker from the SEC walked into my office. He'd been surprisingly interested when I'd reached out about investigating certain investment schemes. Ms. Walker, he said, setting his briefcase on my desk. I've reviewed the documentation you sent. It's comprehensive. I nodded. 10 years of watching my brother scam family members tends to produce a lot of evidence. This goes beyond family, James replied, opening his briefcase. Your brother's been running an unauthorized investment operation, taking money from multiple sources, promising impossible returns. A Ponzi scheme, I finished. I know. I've been tracking it for years. He looked up sharply. Years. Why wait until now to come forward? I turned my monitor so he could see the latest email from Andrew. Emma, seriously need 50 by tomorrow. Huge opportunity. We'll pay back double in a month. Don't tell Mom and Dad. Because sometimes you have to wait for people to reveal who they really are. James studied the email. Your parents, they're victims in this too. They're his biggest enablers, I corrected. They've remortgaged their house 3 times to give him money. The $20,000 I paid 2 weeks ago, that was to save them from foreclosure after his last sure thing investment failed. And they don't know you're the one who reported him. They don't know anything about me, I said quietly. They never have. My phone buzzed. A text from Dad. Monthly mortgage payment due next week. Assuming you're handling it, since you offered to help. I showed it to James. See? They threw me out 2 weeks ago, told me never to come back. Now they just expect me to keep paying. He shook his head. We'll need statements from other victims. Family members who lost money. Already compiled. I handed him a thick folder. Statements, bank records, text messages. Aunt Sarah lost her retirement fund. Uncle Pete had to sell his business. Cousin Michael's kids can't go to college. And they're all willing to testify. They will be. Once they understand what really happened to their money. My phone buzzed again. Mom this time. Andrew needs help with an investment. If you can't support your brother, at least send the mortgage payment. James raised an eyebrow at the message. Perfect timing, I said. Ready to move forward? He nodded, pulling out official-looking documents. We can execute the warrants tomorrow morning. No, I replied, checking my calendar. Next week, Tuesday. Why the delay? Because Monday is the monthly family dinner. The one where Andrew always announces his latest investment opportunity and collects more money. I smiled slightly. I want him to have one last chance to show exactly who he is. After James left, I sat staring at my parents' texts. They hadn't bothered to ask how I was doing after throwing me out. Hadn't acknowledged the money I'd given them. Just demanded more, always more, to feed Andrew's endless schemes. My laptop pinged with an alert. Andrew had just booked a first-class flight to the Cayman Islands for next Wednesday. Right on schedule. I picked up my phone and typed a response to Mom. I'll be at dinner on Monday. Her reply came instantly. Good. Bring your checkbook. Your brother has an amazing opportunity to share. I forwarded the exchange to James, adding surveillance team confirmed for Monday. All set, he replied. Recording devices will catch everything. I started typing an email to all the family members Andrew had scammed, scheduling it to send Tuesday morning. I know what happened to your money. Come to my office at 2 p.m. if you want the full truth. A final text came through from Andrew. Hey sis, got something big to discuss Monday. Bring that business brain of yours. And maybe a blank check? Looking forward to it, I replied. Because I really was. I'd spent years being the responsible one, the reliable one, the one they only noticed when they needed money. Years watching Andrew drain our family's resources while being praised as the successful son. Well, success comes in many forms, and sometimes it looks like finally exposing the truth. I opened my safe and removed the final piece of evidence. A recorded conversation from 5 years ago where Andrew admitted he was running a Ponzi scheme. I'd kept it all this time, waiting for the right moment. That moment was coming. Monday's family dinner would be one to remember, and Tuesday would change everything. I just hoped my parents would finally see the truth about their golden child before they lost everything trying to protect him. But even if they didn't, even if they never forgave me for what I was about to do, I knew it was the right thing. Because sometimes love means stopping people from destroying themselves, even if they hate you for it. Monday evening arrived with a sense of inevitability. I parked outside my parents' house, noting the new luxury car in the driveway, Andrew's latest purchase with other people's money. The SEC surveillance van was discreetly positioned down the street, disguised as a utility vehicle. I checked my watch. 6:45 p.m. In less than 24 hours, everything would change. Mom opened the door before I could knock. Emma, finally. She hugged me as if she hadn't thrown me out 2 weeks ago. Andrew's got such exciting news. The house smelled of pot roast. Mom's specialty, always served when Andrew had a new investment opportunity to discuss. The familiar scent now carried a bitter edge. Dad sat in his usual chair, looking tired but hopeful. Andrew held court in the living room, dressed in an expensive suit that probably cost more than our parents' monthly mortgage. "Little sister," he grinned, showing too many teeth. "Glad you could make it. Brought your checkbook." "Always prepared," I replied, patting my bag. Inside was indeed a checkbook, along with a hidden recording device synced to the SEC team. "That's my girl," Dad said proudly, as if he hadn't sat silently while Mom kicked me out. Always the responsible one. Dinner was a performance of normalcy. Mom served her pot roast, making sure Andrew got the biggest portion. Dad asked about everyone's week, though he only really listened to Andrew's answers. I pushed food around my plate, watching the scene unfold like a play I'd seen too many times. Finally, Andrew cleared his throat. "So, family, I've got something amazing to share. Here we go. I've discovered an investment opportunity that's going to change everything," he continued, eyes bright with rehearsed enthusiasm. "Guaranteed returns of 40% in 3 months." "That's wonderful, honey," Mom beamed. "Sounds impressive," I said carefully. "How does it work?" Andrew launched into his pitch, the same one he'd used countless times, just with different numbers. Exclusive access, limited time offer, too complex to explain fully, but too good to pass up. "I just need some capital to secure our position," he finished. "Say, 50,000? I know it's a lot, but the returns. We can remortgage again," Dad offered immediately. "Actually," I interrupted, "I have some questions first." Andrew's smile flickered. "Come on, sis. You know I wouldn't steer our family wrong. Like you didn't steer Aunt Sarah wrong, or Uncle Pete, or Cousin Michael." The room went silent. "What are you talking about?" Mom demanded. I pulled out my folder. "I'm talking about the $300,000 Andrew has borrowed from family members over the past 5 years. Money that was never repaid. Money that was lost in guaranteed investments." "That's different," Andrew protested. "Those deals just needed more time. Like this deal." I slid a printout across the table. "The one where you've already booked a flight to the Cayman Islands for Wednesday." His face went pale. "Emma?" Mom snapped. "How dare you accuse your brother? It's not an accusation." I stood up, addressing the hidden microphones as much as my family. "It's evidence. Evidence of a Ponzi scheme that's been draining this family dry for years." "What evidence?" Dad asked, his voice barely a whisper. I played the recording from 5 years ago, Andrew's voice clear and damning. "Of course, it's a Ponzi scheme. These people are too stupid to realize. Take their money, show them fake returns, use new investments to pay old investors. It's beautiful." Mom's hands flew to her mouth. Dad seemed to age 10 years in 10 seconds. "You recorded me?" Andrew snarled, lunging for my phone. The front door burst open. James Parker led a team of SEC agents into the room, badges displayed. "Andrew Walker," James announced, "you're under arrest for operating a fraudulent investment scheme, wire fraud, and multiple counts of financial elder abuse." "No," Mom screamed, trying to block the agents. "There must be some mistake. The only mistake," I said quietly, "was enabling him for so long. Watching him destroy this family while pretending everything was fine." As the agents led Andrew away in handcuffs, Dad turned to me with tears in his eyes. "Why didn't you tell us sooner? Would you have believed me? Over him?" I gestured at the house around us. "Every mortgage, every loan, every time you gave him money. I tried to warn you, but you never listened." "We listened," Mom protested weakly. "No," you ordered, asked, demanded, but you never listened. I picked up my bag. "Tomorrow at 2 p.m., I'm meeting with everyone Andrew scammed. You're welcome to join us. Learn exactly what your golden child has done." "Emma, please." Dad reached for my hand. "We need you." "No," I said softly. "You needed me 2 weeks ago when I gave you $20,000. You needed me every time I tried to warn you about Andrew. Now you need to face the truth." I walked to the door, then turned back one last time. "I'll keep paying the mortgage. Not for you, but because this house shouldn't pay for Andrew's crimes. But don't expect anything else until you understand what real success looks like." The next day, my office filled with shell-shocked family members learning the full scope of Andrew's schemes. Aunt Sarah wept over her lost retirement. Uncle Pete raged about his sold business. Cousin Michael mourned his children's college funds. My parents sat in the back, silent for the first time I could remember. When the meeting ended, Mom approached my desk. "We were wrong," she said simply. "About what?" "Everything." She placed a set of keys on my desk. My old house keys. The ones I'd given back 2 weeks ago. "Come home." I picked up the keys, then held them out to her. "I am home. In the life I built while you were busy praising Andrew's lies. We can change," Dad said from behind her. "Then prove it." I handed them a folder. Inside is a repayment plan for everyone Andrew scammed. Start there. Show me you understand the difference between flash and substance. They left with the folder, shoulders bent under the weight of truth. 3 months later, they'd stuck to the repayment plan, started attending financial responsibility classes, and finally started seeing me, really seeing me. Andrew pled guilty, facing years in prison. The family members he'd scammed would eventually recover some of their money through asset seizure and my parents' repayment plan. And me? I kept my promise, paid the mortgage, maintained the house, proved that success isn't about big promises and flashy schemes. Sometimes it's about quiet strength, about doing what's right even when it hurts. Sometimes it's about being the child they didn't want until they needed exactly who you were all along. Mom and Dad visit my office now, actually asking about my business, finally understanding that real success isn't measured in fast returns and empty promises. And that house they almost lost, they've put it up for sale, downsizing to something they can afford without depending on anyone else. They're learning, growing, changing, and so am I. Because sometimes the greatest victory isn't in proving others wrong. It's in finally proving yourself right, even if it takes losing everything to find it. The foreclosure notice lay crumpled on my parents' kitchen table, its red letters stark against the white paper. Mom paced the worn linoleum floor while Dad sat with his head in his hands, the weight of their financial troubles evident in the slope of his shoulders. $20,000, Mom repeated, her voice cracking. Where are we supposed to find that kind of money in 2 weeks? I took a deep breath, smoothing out the notice. I can help. They both turned to look at me, surprise and something else. Was it shame? Crossing their faces. At 32, I'd built a successful software consulting business, though they'd never shown much interest in understanding exactly what I did. "Emma," Dad started, "we can't ask you to." "You're not asking," I interrupted. "I'm offering." The kitchen was silent except for the steady drip of the leaking faucet, a repair that, like so many others, had been postponed due to lack of funds. The house I'd grown up in was showing its age. Peeling wallpaper, creaking floors, a roof that desperately needed replacing. "What about your brother?" Mom asked. "Andrew should help too. He's the successful one."